The topic we're about to discuss is the most important story ever told when it comes to so-called Black Americans, because we've lost our identities as a people. Our identities have been actually stolen from us, but they've been hidden from us. Okay? They've been hidden from us. And we don't know who we really are as a people. And it's time that we finally uncover the truth about who we really are. Because without knowing who you really are, especially if you have an enemy who has made you forget who you are, you won't know who your enemy is. And this is also the first step in getting out of the situation that we've been in for so long. It's such an important story that I wrote an entire book about it that took me 15 years to research and another 3 years to actually write. You can find this book on the website Lost Along the Way. Just go to lostalongtheway.org and you'll be able to get access to the book. It's about 500 pages long, has a complete bibliography to go with it, and over 200 sources in that bibliography. So nobody's going to say we're just making this stuff up. I also made it into a 30-hour long video book. Okay. It's got pictures to go along with it and a lot of commentaries inside of those pictures to go along with it. Because really, without those commentaries and the pictures, it'd be about 1,500 pages long. Okay. It's the most important story when it comes to so-called Black people. It's the most hidden story when it comes to any group of people. So make sure you like and subscribe to the channel and help me spread the word when it comes to our true history. See, because we aren't slaves from Africa like we've been taught we are in school. And this is the generation that's going to break free from this mass hypnosis that we've been under and we've been purposely put under. We were put under a generational hypnosis that started around the 1830s. They made it illegal for us to read, which was the beginning of making us forget who we really were. Once we were able to read again 40 years later, the people who remembered had all died off. And the people who taught us to read again taught us their story of history. Okay? That's why education is so important, because they need to educate you on who you are, because they're not educating you on who you really are. They're educating you on who they need you to be. Okay? Our people are starting to find out who we really are right now. And there's evidence of that all over the place, because we're starting to find out that we're the original people of the Americas, right? So-called Indians, which we're really not Indians, but that's another video. Okay. There's a lot of good people putting in a lot of good work out there right now, but nobody's put together the entire puzzle. Okay. Until now. And so this is a preview of, or a summary of, what is truly the greatest story ever told. It's such an important story, okay, that we're in the process of making a mini series about it. So make sure to stay tuned for that. Lately, I've been making a few videos about Christianity. So if you haven't seen those videos yet, make sure there's some short videos. You can find them in the shorts of the channel. But I've been doing that to prepare to prepare the people for the entire story. Okay? In this story that I'm about to tell you today. Okay? This is the real story of how so-called Black Americans ended up in America. Okay? This is a summary of what happened, because this is a very long and complicated story that has been purposely hidden from us. But the reason that it's been hidden from us is going to start to become more and more clear as we go on. Okay? So we've been taught to believe that we're slaves from Africa when this isn't the case at all. Okay? Now, just because we're not slaves from Africa doesn't mean we don't have roots in Africa. But that's not the only place we have roots. Okay? But we have family in Africa. We have family in other places. But the overwhelming majority of us are not from Africa. And the ones who are mainly from North Africa and South Africa. See, the places on this planet that are now white, like North Africa, South Africa, Europe, America, and Australia, see, they became that way. They weren't always that way. The so-called white Americans, white North and South Africans, and white Australians are not originally from any of those places. They were moved to those places. And they were moved to all of those places as what were called colonists or settlers, as they prefer to say. But the thing is, see, I made a whole video about this, but I focused it on the 13 colonies, because the 13 colonies were prisons. Okay? Colonies and settlements are what the people of the 15 through 1800s called prisons. See, this is a long video about blackface and how it applies to the colonial system. But the colonial system itself was the imprisonment of the prisoners of England and Ireland, okay, France, and some other places. All of the colonies that were set up in North and South Africa, Australia, and America were set up as prisons. And this is how so-called white people ended up in those places. It's, like I said, there's a very long and complicated story. But they're the ones who were shipped on boats to these various places in the world starting in 1580. Okay? Now, there's so much more to this. And this happened in many more places among many more groups. But I wrote an entire book about this to make sure everybody gets it. Okay? So you're going to learn about this discussion, what I'm going to talk about today, and so much more. And once you actually get the video book, you'll understand why this isn't a YouTube video. This isn't a TikTok video. This is something you're going to have to sit. It's going to take you some time to really get into it and understand what happened and how we got to the point where we are today. See, many of our so-called Black American roots come from what today we call Spain and what today we call Morocco, not sub-Saharan Africa. The people who live in these places today that have so-called white skin are not the original people of those places. See, they were brought to those places by black Moors and Black Israelites whose roots come from modern day Spain, Great Britain, France, Germany, Morocco, Tunisia, Libya, Algeria, Turkey, and Egypt. See, these are the real roots of so-called Black Americans. And it's also important to know that all of these places have been renamed into new places starting around the 1800s. None of these places have their original names, America included. The name of America has been hidden from us, but it's also staring us right in the face in some small places that we have no idea. They hide it from us right in our face. See, modern day Black Americans used to have their own empire. But by July 4th, 1830, the last remaining strongholds of this empire had been taken over by the very prisoners who were sent to these several places throughout the empire. Part of this former empire was renamed the Ottoman Empire, and the rest of it was renamed the British, Portuguese, French, and Dutch empires. And they make us believe that these are all white people who control all of it, either whites or Arabs, light-skinned Arabs. See? But what we don't know is all of this started as a vast empire that belonged to and was completely controlled by modern day Black Americans and their family members who still remain in many of these places across the world or places close by. Our empire was handed its first major defeat on April 1st, 1492, with the fall of Granada, which is in modern day Spain, but was originally called Al-Andalus or Andalusia. See, it was the Christian church who took over Granada by way of a newly formed alliance called the Spanish, which comprised two groups who lived in modern day Spain called the Aragonese and the Castilians. They teamed up together and started to call themselves Spaniards. And that's why the name of Al-Andalus was changed to Spain. Okay. But the people who renamed Al-Andalus, they first kicked out the Black Israelites in 1492 from their homes in the name of Christianity. The church added the New Testament to the Bible at this time, and our ancestors were given a choice to either convert to Christianity or to burn alive on a cross. Some of us stayed and converted to Christianity. Some of us had the idea that we could convert to Christianity and still practice Judaism without the Christians knowing it. But they made it a crime to practice Judaism, and they called it Judaizing. And if you got caught Judaizing, they would burn you alive on the stake after torturing you into confessing your crime. And what was your crime? Practicing Judaism. So some of us stayed. So others of us went. Some of us went to places like France, which is the next door neighbor of modern day Spain. Some of us went to England because we had family members in England, ran businesses, and had people to go to in England, Scotland, Ireland. When we went to those places, they accepted us, gave us free land, and didn't charge us taxes. Some of us went to modern day Italy, where we weren't so accepted. And Venice is where the first ghettos were created as a result of us being kicked out of our homes. And that's a whole nother video within itself as well. But I go into it in the book. Some of us went to modern day Turkey, Morocco, and other places in North Africa. But the place that almost nobody knows about that we went to is America. And that's why in the same year, Columbus discovered America. When the Jews and later the Moors, and when I say Jew, I'm not talking about white Jews. I'm not talking about Jewish people. The ish at the end of it means like a Jew. Okay? Some people prefer to refer to them as the Israelites. Okay? But when these black Israelites and the Moors were kicked out of Spain, this was the beginning of what so many of us call the true diaspora. And the word diaspora refers to the Israelites, those black Jews who were kicked out of Spain. Is the black Africans getting kicked out of Africa and becoming slaves, when that's not true at all. See? These black Israelites and Moors came to America from modern day Spain and set America up as we know it today. But they didn't come to some empty land. They came to the place where their family members already lived. They came to a place where they already had businesses established. They came to a place where they had already been coming to for thousands of years. It's just the church didn't know about America. The church discovered America. And the church will tell you that when they so-called discovered America, there was already people there. Of course there was already people there. They joined their family members, which were what today we call Indians. But we're not talking about red Indians. Okay? We're talking about the original people. And they weren't even called Indians back then. Okay? See? That's a deception within itself to take you away from who you really are. And that happens to us because we start getting pieces of this puzzle together and then we start going in wrong directions. But that's what I'm saying. That's the purpose of this book. To put it all together for you and show you what's been hidden from you. The so-called Indians were called Moors. And I put up a couple pictures. This is what the so-called black Indians were called. 100 years later, these Jews, Moors, and their family members from England devised a plan to solve England's crime problem that had started in the mid-1500s. And the way it started is a super long story within itself. But like I said, I go into all of that in the book. Their solution had been, prior to the solution that I'm about to tell you, to just lynch the prisoners whenever they got caught committing a crime. And a solution, a more what they call merciful solution, was devised. Instead of killing the prisoners, they would start putting those prisoners to work. They would teach those prisoners a skill so they would have a way to make money on their own. And this is what an apprenticeship is. And this is where the apprenticeship comes from. They were given a way out. Instead of committing crimes, we're going to give you a trade. But you're going to learn that trade while you're in prison. And the same thing happens to this day. Prisoners don't just go to prison and sit there. They learn trades. So this plan had been put in place as a solution to the crime problem that had been brewing up in Great Britain. And Queen Elizabeth is the one, and she's a so-called Black Queen Elizabeth. She was talked into having mercy on these prisoners and to invest in these companies that were called colonies. These colonies were companies and would put the prisoners to work. It was a win-win for everybody. The queen got to clean her streets up and get the prisoners and the homeless people off the streets. While the companies that she was a major investor in, as well as other people, called colonies that were chartered by the queen and other people, they were able to have cheap labor. And then after, it wasn't just a win for them. After the 7 to 14 year sentence that they were given, they themselves, the prisoners, would have a trade so they wouldn't have to go back to their life of crime. So it was set up for everybody to win. Not just the rich, not just the poor. These colonies were companies. And they were companies that held prisoners. So what we hear of today as colonists and settlers who would work on settlements, colonies and settlements, okay? These people who were coming over to America and North Africa and South Africa at first and later Australia, they weren't coming over as what we think of as settlers and adventurers looking for a new life. This is not what they were coming over for. Okay? If you want more of a brief introduction to that, watch that video about the 13 colonies. Okay? They were coming over as prisoners. The word borough means prison, like the boroughs of New York. And those aren't the only ones. Okay? The borough, Manhattan was a prison. Queens was a prison. The entire Brooklyn was a prison. All of them were prisons. Okay? And who was sending these prisoners to the prisons? The Black Queen Elizabeth is who started it. The Jews and the Moors were the business owners of the colonies that were chartered by the English crown, the Stuart English crown, the House of Stuart. And the House of Stuart are the black queens and kings of England, of Scotland, of Ireland. It was so-called black people who were sending white people to America, North Africa, South Africa, and later Australia. The settlers and colonists, as they prefer to call themselves today, are really all prisoners. These freed prisoners, once they got free, would start to form groups called abolitionists. And the abolitionists began to refer to these prisoners as slaves because prisoners don't get paid. They do get paid, But what they had to do is they had to pay back their transportation to get to wherever they were shipped to. So if they were shipped to America, they had to pay for that trip. They had to pay for the knowledge they were receiving to learn that trade, just like you pay to go to college and learn, or to a trade school and learn a trade. But the abolitionists that we're taught to believe were freeing black slaves were really trying to free white prisoners. And I go heavily into that in the book as well. Okay. See, this story is way too long to tell in a 1, 2, or even a 10-hour video. Okay, so that's why I wrote the book about it. And it's the most interesting and most important story that's ever been told. So make sure you get this book, Lost Along the Way. There's so much more to this story. But black Americans didn't just enslave white Europeans. We also enslaved, like I said, which really means brought these prisoners over to various places throughout the colonies that we set up throughout the world to work as their prison sentence. But it was black Americans who were bringing Africans over, African prisoners over, as what today we refer to as slaves. That's why you'll hear people say black people were enslaving black people. See, because they lumped us all into one big group and now we're all black. That's like if we were to just lump Asians, Chinese, Mongolians, Koreans, Japanese, and the Vietnamese, and all the various, and we just started lumping them in all to one group, and we just said they're all yellow. These are just yellow people. That's what they did to us. See, we can tell the difference. We know that there's differences between Chinese, Japanese, Koreans, etc. We know that, right? But that's what they did to us. We don't know that when it comes to us as a people, because that's been hidden from us. Right? But we were the ones, black Americans were the ones bringing over Africans, African prisoners to America. The Red Indians who came over here, because they weren't originally here. Okay? And they started mixing and becoming new groups. They were also got brought here as prisoners. Modern day Chinese, Japanese, Koreans, Filipinos, the Hindus that we call Indians, okay? All of them, all of their prisoners were brought here to America. And modern day black Americans were in charge of all of this because we were in charge of the entire world. But we were eventually taken over by a combination of people, or what the church, because they were the leader of the peoples who took us over, what they prefer to call their allies on July 4th, 1830. See? So this is the real reason we're so hated by not just so-called white people, but so many other groups of people throughout the world. Okay? Imagine if someone came to America and fought against the current government of America, won the war that they fought, and then set the prisoners free, and then put those same prisoners in charge of the people who locked them up. How would those prisoners treat the people who locked them up? Whether it wouldn't matter if they were they committed the crime or not. How would they treat them, is my point. That's what happened to us. After the people who went to war with us took us over, they put the prisoners in charge of us, and they went home. This is when we were put into slavery the way they tell the story of that we were enslaved. At at this time. And it started to happen on July 4th, 1830, when our main base of power was taken over by the Christian church and its allies, which I proved beyond the shadow of a doubt, because this was all headline news at one time. Okay? The same way we look at America as the most powerful country in the world, that's how it was for us when we were in charge of our own nation, America, which wasn't even called America at that time. See, this is what they don't want you to know. They fear you, and they fear you knowing who you really are, because they haven't forgotten who you are. It's only you who've forgotten who you are. And they have been working tirelessly to make sure you never know. You never wake up from your slumber. You never know who you really are. And why? Because they came up with this plan to make you forget who you are, because they're scared to death of you, that if you remember who you are, you'll do it to them again. They made a vow to never let white slavery happen again. And when they say white slavery, they really mean white prisoners. See, we don't really know what a slave is. We don't really know what slavery is, because it's been manipulated and rebranded into something completely different. Okay? We're not slaves from Africa. I spent an entire chapter talking about, it's one of the longest chapters in the book, about what slavery really is. See, we were the slave master the entire time. They don't want you to know that. If you knew that you controlled an entire empire and were in charge of the entire world, you wouldn't look at yourselves like you look at yourselves today. If you knew that it didn't happen 400 years ago and 200 white people came and brought 20 million of us from Africa, and it only took 5 of them to put 500 of us on a boat because they had guns and we were backward spear chuckers from the jungle, and we didn't know anything about technology, and we were just trading stuffed mirrors and stuff. We were so infatuated with their tickets that they gave us that we sold all of our land for a mirror. We sold all of our land for a music box. I mean, they're really playing with you. They're really playing with you. And they laugh at you every time they tell you any of these stories behind your back. We have a rich history, and we aren't limited to just black Indians. We aren't just limited to black Europeans. We aren't limited to just black North Africans. We aren't limited to just the ancient Egyptians. This story goes back. This story goes back thousands of years. This is the most important story ever told. They've made movies and miniseries like Roots. They've made fake letters like the Willie Lynch letter, where they have us reenacting them abusing us, them doing all kinds of crazy things to us that never even happened the way they tell the story. I'm going to release this video that I just did about the Willie Lynch letter, where we were supposed to be getting buck broke and our women was getting raped in front of us and all this nonsense. This is a fake letter that they put out. And it's been proven to be a fake. But we just sit up here and keep reiterating it because we're under a mind control. And it's time for us to break this mind control. You were the most powerful people in the entire world until July 4th, 1830. And this isn't me just talking. This is inside of congressional records. Prove what I have to say. The congressional records prove that you control the entire world. The congressional records prove it. They just didn't know that we would get this information. They didn't plan on us getting this information, but we've got it. It's all in the book, Lost Along the Way. I need you to get this book, Lost Along the Way. Go to the website, lostalongtheway.org, and we're going to make a big change. Peace and love.